So we have done a couple stories in the last few weeks about farmers and ranchers on the southern border and what their property rights are when it comes to illegal immigration and kind of defending their land if there are people that are using it to try to get across or they're trying to break in, trying to steal. Um, from your perspective, how big of an issue is that in South Texas for property
Well,
owners?
well, it was a huge issue, and I can't say that it started just under the Biden administration. I think it was brought to light even more so because there was a whole segment of the Texas-Mexico border that had not been affected like the lower Rio Grande Valley had in the past, where we had made a lot of inroads with infrastructure and technology and more boots on the ground. But then when the border opened, as per the Biden administration, more flow began just exponentially everywhere. And of course, the cartel will take advantage of those weak spots. And the Del Rio Border Patrol sector was that weak spot. And so more landowners, of course, were affected. And I think before, um, there was always a tension, always, okay, let's see what the current administration at the time before the Obama administration, there was always help. Even during the Obama administration, we were able to get assets. But that stopped. In fact, there was not one Democratic congressional or senatorial delegation that came to the border during that time. So the landowner really felt, all landowners felt forgotten. They felt like they were not important. And so that's when Governor Abbott stepped up to help the landowner.
What kinds of programs did he put in place or assistance did he offer to help landowners on the border?
Well, finally, last session, the last legislative session, it became very important. It's something that we, as an association, had pushed for some time, and that was compensation for damages that occurred due to border security incursions. And so that legislation passed, and it's being handled through the Attorney General's office, where they can go after getting a law enforcement report and getting all the information needed and required per the application and submit that for reimbursement. And that's too bad. It wasn't even necessary. And I know a lot of the Texas taxpayers were not real excited about having to foot that bill, but when there was a void and a feeling of forgottenness by anyone other than the state of Texas in the landowner concerns. But I mean, this is our land. This is where we grow food and fiber for the state and the nation. And I think that was highly overlooked. So we appreciate Governor Abbott's attention, and of course, he did much more as well with the troops and the DPS assets and State Guard. So without that, I hate to even consider what it would have looked like otherwise.
When we were out on the border talking to a rancher, the way he explained it to me was that it's like a chess match where he will come up with a security measure, but then smugglers or migrants will find a way around it. And it's this game that they play back and forth, layering and layering. What kind of solutions and what kind of resources does he have as a property owner? And what rights does he have in that situation where it feels like you just always have to escalate?
Well, I think that's where the landowner has been operating with one hand tied behind his back, because it is his property and he does have the right to protect it. But if only if there's deadly force in in that situation, and we don't ever want to come to that, right? And then there have been cases in the past where illegal immigrant was injured on property and the landowner was sued. And so that was legislation that we were able to get passed in 2011 that added to the limit of liability for a landowner due to trespassers and law enforcement when they were on the property doing their job as per border security efforts. And so I know there is a piece of legislation in the works that gives the landowner the ability to threaten as per with a deadly firearm. Um, but right now, if you do that, the landowner could be arrested. You can shoot and kill somebody if you feel like there's bodily harm, but otherwise, we're very limited, and that's the scary thing.
Earlier, you mentioned things like surveillance and technology as potential solutions that might help some of these property owners. Um, how far have we come in that way? Like, what kinds of resources are you seeing landowners use now in that surveillance realm to help?
Well, the landowner themselves use cameras, typically wildlife cameras and that sort of thing. But the technology that I was referring to was Border Patrol technology. And the aerostats were a big game changer for the Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol sector. We had two large aerostats that with a view shed of over 20 miles. And those were up here in Brooks County on either side of the Border Patrol checkpoint, which is the largest Border Patrol checkpoint in the nation. And just that alone was a deterrent. Of course, that has its limitations because it can only fly typically about 60% of the time because it's weather sensitive. There are still some along the border, and that technology doesn't need to go away. They need to find a way to use it more economically. But drones is one asset, but if you don't have the boots on the ground to make arrest, and then you need the prosecution to help on deterrence as well. So it's a layered effect of technology, boots on the ground and infrastructure.
Is there anything else that you think is important for people to know, especially for people potentially here in San Antonio that don't live that life
Mhm.
on the border and want to understand the impact of this?
Well, you could maybe equate it to how you would feel if you had somebody coming across your back fence, trying to open your back door, not knowing who they are, sometimes with groups of 10, 20, 30. Now with, the current actions in place, those high numbers have decreased. But I think it's just that sense of not feeling secure, not knowing who's out there and what their intentions are, and just not ever feeling safe totally on your property. And I think that's one thing that all landowners, whether you're a homeowner in San Antonio or a landowner in South Texas, that just wants to be able to operate and do what they love to do on the land. I think it's something that we as a nation need to understand that this is the United States of America where our freedoms and protections are highly important, and I think everybody would appreciate that.
Absolutely. I think that's all I've got for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or make sure gets included in here?
Well, this is as it pertains to just the landowner experience
Hmm.
as it pertains. I I think just the onslaught of just feeling forgotten for a period of time. I don't think this needs to be a political issue. I think this is something that every citizen in the United States should be able to feel like they're safe, that they can earn a living, prosper, enjoy their family, wherever they live, even along the border.
There is, I glanced behind my Zoom and I have this up. There is a bill that was introduced in 2024 in federal Congress and then reintroduced again in this year by Representative Monica de la Cruz.
Okay.
And it would, let me pull this up. Authorize payments under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program to assist farmers and ranchers with repairing their farming infrastructure along the southern border caused by illegal criminal activity. So that has been introduced. It hasn't been passed yet.
Mhm.
Um, what would the benefits be or the differences be having something like that federally as opposed to the state of Texas?
Well, so since border security is a federal issue, right? You typically the state only stepped up because there was a vacuum at the federal level. And the landowners, especially, and this is Monica de la Cruz's district, and she's got that's a farming, a large farming population along the border in her district. And these properties were being overrun, and a lot of these are organic fields. And if there's any contamination at all, it highly affects. In fact, you can't even use the produce. So I think that's where she's coming from on that and the farming. In a lot of ways, it's a little bit different with different areas of concern versus on the ranching property.